First tonight, until about 80 years ago, plastic was all but unheard of. Now it's, of course, everywhere in our daily lives.
In a typical day, you will probably come into contact with plastic hundreds of times. Now, plastic does a lot of good, but it can also do serious harm to people, animals, and the environment.
Michael SanClements, a scientist who got his PhD at the University of Maine, is the author of the book Plastic Purge: How to Use Less Plastic, Eat Better, Keep Toxins Out of Your Body, and Help Save the Sea Turtles.
He talked with us about how plastic was created when a company offered a $10,000 reward for a substitute for the ivory used in billiard balls. And that was plastic's innocent beginning.
It's actually a great product. It's cheap, it's durable, it's buoyant, you can make it into almost anything, and it lasts forever. But the problem is it sort of behaves like an invasive species where now we have far too much of it in the wrong place and there's, if you will, no predator to get it.
You divide plastics into three categories: the good, the bad, and the ugly. What are you talking about when you describe good plastics?
When I'm describing good plastics, it's the plastic that enables technological advances in our lives, whether that be insulation or nylon for clothing that's waterproof, or the plastic that's, like I said, in this camera or your computer, plastic that actually goes into allowing us to do things that we couldn't do without that product.
What's your definition of bad plastics?
So when I think of bad plastics, I think of plastic that we might reuse a number of times, but it might be introducing chemicals into us that we don't want in our bodies, or that aren't naturally there. So today, the average 90% of adults have chemicals from plastic in their bloodstreams at any given time, which is kind of an odd thought and a scary thought. And some of these are potentially endocrine disruptors, so they have the capacity to drive hormonal changes in humans.
It's a pretty extraordinary statistic. 90% of human adults have plastic in their bodies.
Yeah, the chemicals derived from plastic in their bodies, yes.
And we haven't even gotten to the ugly plastics of the good, the bad, and the ugly. What are the ugly ones?
So the ugly plastics are single-use plastics. And single-use plastics are those plastics which you use once and then throw away. So you might think of that plastic fork you use, or the wrapping around an apple if it's wrapped in plastic, or a cucumber. You hold it for a moment and you toss it. And the reason I think of this as ugly plastic is because it's the plastic you tend to actually see littering streets, like that plastic bag swirling around or that fork. It typically is the plastic that makes its appearance ugly in the environment.
I think most people have good intentions. They want to be good stewards of the earth. But they say, what can I do? So what is the answer? What can we all do to use less of the damaging plastics that are harming our planet?
So many of these solutions actually are simple things, like going back to a reusable water bottle and having water fountains again, or going back to that bar of soap instead of the bottle of body wash that we all encounter now, and replacing saran wrap with things like using a mason jar or beeswax wrap. There's a lot of simple solutions to these problems out there, and we can start to take those on in our household, and it's pretty easy and pretty cheap to cut a lot of your plastic out of your house.
I'm guessing you've made a concerted effort to cut plastic, unnecessary plastic use out of your life. How much would you say you've eliminated?
That's a good question. I would say, compared to, before I ever really gave this much thought, I would say we've cut, when it comes to single-use plastic, I'd say like 90% of it out of our day-to-day living in our house. Yeah.
And you're not going around leading a miserable life as a result?
No, it's actually fairly easy. I think of shampoo, right? 4 or 5 years ago, there weren't a lot of options for shampoo if you didn't want to buy a plastic bottle. Now there's multiple companies out there that are beginning to sell shampoo in bar form. It's really simple. You're just using a bar of soap and then using it, but it's great, works great. Yeah. The grocery store. We go there and we all tend to put, our carrot or our cucumber in that plastic bag and put it in our cart. It's very simple to just not put that cucumber in the plastic bag and put it directly in your cart.
We should mention recycling, because a lot of people say, oh, well, I use plastic, but I recycle almost all of it. Is that a good thing?
Unfortunately, it's not the solution we want it to be. Only about 9% of plastic is recycled globally. It's a very small amount. And recently, China, you may have seen this in news, has stopped taking a lot of our waste. So right now, the global plastic market, recycling market, is kind of a mess. There isn't a lot of places for it to go, and a lot of it's being landfilled.
Michael SanClements has this little checklist of how plastic is just in our lives from the moment we wake up. What's the first thing you do? When you're awakened, you probably reach over, turn off the alarm. Cell phone or maybe an alarm clock, plastic.
Okay.
You get up, you flick the switch to turn on the light, it's a plastic switch. You go into the bathroom, you get your plastic toothbrush, you brush your teeth, you push aside the plastic shower curtain, and on and on and on. And that's just in the first 5-10 minutes of your day, and there are a lot more times when you are dealing with plastic.
And those are all things I never would have thought about. I think about that shopping bag and the water bottle, but never would have thought about any of that.
Exactly. It's right there. What you're holding right there. Now he says this is an example of the good kind because this plastic lasts a long time. It's not the single-use plastic, and that's what he says we all really need to try to address and use less of. Michael SanClements spoke last week at Bates College in Lewiston. Our thanks to the folks at Bates for helping to make that interview possible.